So in the last segment of this lecture, we talked about disposition moral skepticism. Now we're going to look at arguments that have been offered to the effect that moral skepticism is true. That is, there are good reasons to hold this view about the nature of our ability to know moral truths. And the first argument that Rachel considers, he calls the cultural differences argument. Cultural differences argument, as it's given in his chapter, goes like this. Premise 1. In some societies, such as among Eskimos, infanticide is thought to be morally acceptable. So the term Eskimos refers to indigenous people that inhabit areas in North America and Siberia and the circumpolar regions, and they include Inuits and Yupiks. There's about 90,000 estimated Eskimos in this area, and prior to basically the 19th century, they led a relatively isolated life. And so when they started to have greater interaction with Western cultures, one of the striking differences in their ethical or moral codes that was noticed was that they didn't have a prohibition against infanticide. Now, it's a myth that there's been a strong prohibition against infanticide in Western societies, in Europe, and so on. There have been periods where infanticide has been considered to be more acceptable than it was during the 19th and 20th centuries, but it certainly was different in Europe and in North America when they started having increased interactions with Eskimos and noticed that Eskimos didn't have a prohibition against infanticide. So premise 1, infanticide is thought to be acceptable in some societies, or at least it has been. In other societies, such as Western European and North American societies, infanticide is thought to be morally odious. That is, there's a prohibition against infanticide. So those are our premises, our evidence, our descriptive facts about the nature of the world. The conclusion is as follows. Infanticide is neither objectively right nor objectively wrong. It is merely a matter of opinion that varies from culture to culture. So we go from facts about conflicting moral codes, codes that prescribe different courses of action with regard to infanticide, to a conclusion that there is no fact of the matter regarding infanticide. And Rachel calls this the cultural differences argument for moral skepticism. Now, Rachel is going to criticize this argument. He's going to criticize it by adopting that second strategy that we talked about. He's going to argue that the inferential claim made by this argument isn't good, that it's an invalid deductive argument, and hence the truth of the premises doesn't guarantee the truth of the conclusion. So even if we accept the premises as accurate descriptions of cultural differences, it doesn't follow that the conclusion is guaranteed to be true given the truth of those premises. So how does Rachel go about doing that? Well, he goes about doing that by creating a counterexample. That is, he creates an argument that has the same underlying logical form. The structural relationships between content elements are the same, but it has different content. And this new content makes it clear that it's possible for the premises to be true without guaranteeing that the conclusion is true. Since they have the same logical form, these two arguments, and one of them is obviously invalid, then the other will be invalid as well, even though it's not as obvious based on our understanding of its content. And so he's going to argue that the fact that we have different or contradictory beliefs about the praiseworthiness and blameworthiness of particular moral beliefs or actions, it doesn't follow that there's no fact of the matter to be known, that we have no way of knowing the truth about these things. So how's he going to do that? Well, he's going to give us this counterexample. The counterexample goes as follows. He's going to offer up an argument that has two premises that are descriptive facts about cultural beliefs, and he's going to draw a different conclusion that's related in the same way as the first conclusion is the first set of premises, but is obviously not something that follows from the truth of the premises. So, first premise, some societies hold that the world is flat. So, at least in the past, some groups of people in societies have thought that the world was flat, not sort of spherical or egg-shaped the way it actually is. In other societies, the world is thought to be round or spherical in nature. So we have two beliefs about the world. They are contradictory, and so following the logical form of the previous argument, we then conclude that objectively speaking, the world is neither flat nor round. It's merely a matter of opinion that varies from culture to culture. There's no fact of the matter. There's no truth that we can know about the nature of the shape of the world. And this argument is clearly invalid. The premises are true. It has been thought that the world is flat, has been thought that the world is round. It doesn't follow that there is no way to know the truth about that, and therefore the truth of the premises doesn't guarantee the truth of the conclusion. So Rachel's rejects the cultural differences argument as an invalid argument. The truth of the premises, even if we think they're true, won't guarantee the truth of the conclusion, and so the argument doesn't provide us with good reasons to adopt a moral, skeptical position. Let's take a look at the second argument that Rachel offers up in favor of moral skepticism. He calls this